a Wikividi Documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Ben Carson. Benjamin Solomon Carson Sr. is an American neurosurgeon, author, and politician who is the 17th and current United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under the Trump administration. Prior to his cabinet position, he was a candidate for President of the United States in the Republican primaries in 2016. Born in Detroit, Michigan, and a graduate of Yale University and the University of Michigan Medical School, Carson has authored numerous books on his medical career and political stances. He was the subject of a television drama film in 2009. He was the director of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Maryland from 1984 until his retirement in 2013. As a pioneer in neurosurgery, Carson's achievements include performing the only successful separation of conjoined twins joined at the back of the head, pioneering the first successful neurosurgical procedure on a fetus inside the womb, performing the first completely successful separation of type 2 vertical craniopacus twins, developing new methods to treat brainstem tumors, and reviving hemispherectomy techniques for controlling seizures. He became the youngest chief of pediatric neurosurgery in the country at age 33. He has received more than 60 honorary doctorate degrees, dozens of national merit citations, and written over 100 neurosurgical publications. In 2008, he was bestowed the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian award in the United States. Carson's widely publicized speech at the 2013 National Prayer Breakfast catapulted him to conservative fame for his views on social and political issues. On May 4, 2015, he announced he was running for the Republican nomination in the 2016 presidential election at a rally in his hometown of Detroit. In March 2016, following the Super Tuesday primaries, he suspended his campaign and announced he would be the new national chairman of My Faith Votes, a group that encourages Christians to exercise their civic duty to vote. He then endorsed the candidacy of Donald Trump. On March 2, 2017, Carson was confirmed by the United States Senate as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in a 58-41 vote. Early life and education. Carson was born in Detroit, Michigan, to Robert Solomon Carson Jr., a World War II U.S. Army veteran, and his wife, Sonia Carson. Robert Carson was a Baptist minister, but later a Cadillac automobile plant laborer. Both of his parents came from large families in rural Georgia, and they were living in rural Tennessee when they met and married. Carson's mother was 13 and his father was 28 when they married, and after his father finished his military service, they moved from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Detroit, where they lived in a large house in the Indian Village neighborhood. Carson's older brother, Curtis, was born in 1949, when his mother was 20. In 1950, Carson's parents purchased a new 733-square-foot single-family detached home on Deacon Street in the Boynton neighborhood in southwest Detroit. Carson's Detroit Public Schools education began in 1956 with kindergarten at the Fisher School, and continued through first, second, and the first half of third grade, during which time he was an average student. When Carson was 5, his mother learned that his father had a prior family and had not divorced his first wife. In 1959, when Carson was 8, his parents separated, and he moved with mother and brother to live for 2 years with his mother's Seventh-day Adventist older sister and her sister's husband in multi-family dwellings in the Dorchester and Roxbury neighborhoods of Boston. In Boston, Carson's mother attempted suicide, had several psychiatric hospitalizations for depression, and, for the first time, began working outside the home as a domestic worker, while Carson and his brother attended a 2-classroom school at the Berea Seventh-day Adventist Church where 2 teachers taught 8 grades, and the vast majority of time was spent singing songs and playing games. In 1961, when Carson was 10, he moved with his mother and brother back to southwest Detroit, where they lived in a multi-family dwelling in a primarily white neighborhood across the railroad tracks from the Delray neighborhood, while renting out their house on Deacon Street, which his mother received in a divorce settlement. When they returned to Detroit public schools, Carson and his brother's academic performance initially lagged far behind their new classmates. Having essentially lost a year of school, by attending a Seventh-day Adventist church school in Boston, but both improved when their mother limited their time watching television and required them to read and write book reports on 2 library books per week. Carson attended the predominantly white Higgins Elementary School for 5th and 6th grades and the predominantly white Wilson Junior High School for 7th and the first half of 8th grade. In 1965, when Carson was 13, he moved with his mother and brother back to their house on Deacon Street. He attended the predominantly black Hunter Junior High School for the second half of 8th grade. When he was 8, Carson had dreamed of becoming a missionary doctor, but 5 years later he aspired to the lucrative lifestyles of psychiatrists portrayed on television, and his brother bought him a subscription to Psychology Today for his 13th birthday. High school. By 9th grade, the family's financial situation had improved, his mother surprising neighbors by paying cash to buy a new Chrysler car. And the only government assistance they still relied on was food stamps. Carson attended the predominantly black Southwestern High School for 9th through 12th grades, graduating 3rd in his class academically. In high school he played the baritone horn in the band, and participated in forensics, chess club, and the U.S. Army Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps program, where he reached its highest rank, cadet colonel. Carson served as a laboratory assistant in the high school's biology, chemistry, physics school laboratories beginning in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, respectively, and worked as a biology laboratory assistant at Wayne State University the summer between 11th and 12th grades. In his book Gifted Hands, Carson relates that as a youth he had a violent temper. As a teenager, I would go after people with rocks, and bricks, and baseball bats, and hammers, Carson told NBC's Meet the Press in October 2015. He said he once tried to hit his mother on the head with a hammer, over a clothing dispute. While in the 9th grade he tried to stab a friend who had changed the radio station. Fortunately, the blade broke in his friend's belt buckle. Carson said that the intended victim, whose identity he wants to protect, was a classmate, a friend, or a close relative. After this incident, Carson said that he began reading the book of Proverbs and applying verses on anger. As a result, he states he never had another problem with temper. In his various books and at campaign events, he repeated these stories, and said he once attacked a schoolmate with a combination lock. 9 friends, classmates, and neighbors who grew up with him told CNN in 2015 they did not remember the anger or violence he has described. In response, Carson posted on Facebook a 1997 Parade magazine issue, in which his mother verified the stabbing incident. He then questioned the extent of the effort CNN had exerted in the investigation. He has said that he protected white students in a biology lab after a race riot broke out at his high school in response to the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968. The Wall Street Journal confirmed the riot, but could not find anyone who remembered Carson sheltering white students. College. Carson's SAT college admission test scores ranked him somewhere in the low 90th percentile, which according to him resulted in a Detroit Free Press article. Carson gets highest SAT scores in 20 years of any student in Detroit public schools. He wanted to attend college farther away than his brother who was at the University of Michigan. Carson says he narrowed his college choices to Harvard or Yale, but could only afford the $10 application fee to apply to one of them. He said he decided to apply to Yale after seeing a team from Yale defeat a team from Harvard on the GE College Bowl television show. Carson was accepted by Yale and offered a full scholarship covering tuition, room and board. Carson graduated with a BA in psychology from Yale in 1973, with a fairly respectable grade point average. Although far from the top of the class, Carson does not say in his books if he received a college student deferment during the Vietnam War. He does say that his older brother, then a student at the University of Michigan, received a low number in the first draft lottery in 1969 and was able to enlist in the Navy for 4 years instead of being drafted, whereas he received a high number in the second draft lottery in 1970. Carson said he would have readily accepted his responsibility to fight had he been drafted, but he identified strongly with the anti-war protesters and the revolutionaries, and enthusiastically voted for anti-war Democratic presidential candidate George McGovern in 1972. In his book, America the Beautiful, Carson said, "The Vietnam War was, in retrospect, not a noble conflict. It brought shame to our nation, because of both the outcome and the cause." In the summers following his high school graduation until his second year in medical school, Carson worked at a variety of jobs, as a clerk in the payroll office of Ford Motor Company, supervisor of a 6-person crew picking up trash along the highway under a federal jobs program for inner-city students, a clerk in the mailroom of Young and Rubicam Advertising, assembling fender parts and inspecting back window louvers on the assembly line at Chrysler, a crane operator at Senate Steel, and finally a radiology technician taking X-rays. At Yale, Carson had a part-time job on campus as a student police aide. In his autobiography, Carson said he had been offered a scholarship to West Point. Politico reported that West Point has no record of his ever seeking admission. The Academy does not award scholarships to anyone. Cadets receive a free education and room and board in exchange for a commitment to serve in the military for at least 5 years after graduation. Carson also said the University of Michigan had offered him a scholarship. His staff later said that the described scenario was similar to that of West Point, as he never actually applied for entry to the University of Michigan. In his autobiography, Gifted Hands, Carson recounted that exams for a Yale psychology course he took his junior year, Perceptions 301, were inexplicably burned, forcing students to retake the exam. Carson said that other students walked out in protest when they discovered the retest was significantly harder than the original examination, but he alone finished the test. On doing so, Carson said he was congratulated by the course instructor who told him the retest was a hoax intended to find the most honest student in the class. Carson said the professor awarded him $10, and that a photographer for the Yale Daily News was present to take his picture, which appeared in the student newspaper with a story about the experiment. Doubts were raised about this story in 2015 during Carson's presidential campaign. The Wall Street Journal attempted to verify Carson's account, reporting that Yale undergraduate courses were identified with only 2 digits in the early 1970s, and that Yale offered no course called Perceptions 301 at that time, and that Carson's photo never appeared in the Yale Daily News. Carson, while acknowledging the class number was not correct, said, "You know, when you write a book with a co-writer and you say that there was a class, a lot of the time they'll put a number or something just to give it more meat. You know, obviously, decades later, I'm not going to remember the course number." Brought to you by Wikividi Documentaries. Would you like to know more